The 6th century was a period of grandeur and challenge for the Byzantine Empire. Constantinople, with its magnificent walls and golden churches, was the jewel of the empire, a city of splendor and vibrant activity. Its inhabitants were descendants of a civilization that had never known decadence, one that had built one of the greatest powers in the world. The empire was prosperous, its streets filled with merchants, artisans, and scholars. The domes of the Byzantine churches reflected the sun's glow, while its markets overflowed with spices, silk, and precious metals. The city was at the height of an era that seemed eternal. But in a dark corner of the world, an invisible storm was approaching, and nothing could stop what was about to happen. In the heart of Central Asia, where vast steppes stretched to the horizon, a microscopic bacterium was preparing to invade the empire. The winter of 541 AD was approaching, and unbeknownst to the people of Constantinople, they were about to face the greatest calamity the world had ever known. The Plague of Justinian, an unprecedented tragedy, did not start with a bang. There was no warning, no glimpse of its impact. Instead, it crept in like a shadow. It was an invisible bacterium, spread by the feces and saliva of rats, a microscopic enemy that moved in silence. But when it arrived, death was swift, and hopelessness immeasurable. The first signs of the plague were a high fever, followed by excruciating pain and black boils that spread across the body in a terrifying way. Victims were consumed by the disease in a matter of days, often in hours. There was no explanation. There was no defense. The empire, which seemed invincible, was being devastated from the inside out, not by an invasion of armies, but by an invisible and relentless enemy. Constantinople, the Byzantine capital, was the first to fall. Like a bustling city, full of life, it became, in a matter of days, a cemetery of bodies. The streets, once vibrant with activity, became deserted. The sound of market cries was silenced, replaced by the wailing of desperate families. The churches, once filled with worshippers, were now empty, and the sound of prayers was muffled by the screams of anguish. It was a city besieged by death, and no one knew where it came from or how to stop it. The doctors of Constantinople were educated men, but they were completely powerless. They believed in ancient theories, like the theory of humors, which suggested that disease was caused by imbalances in the body's fluids. Treatments were cruel and ineffective. Bloodletting, hot baths, incense burned in every street. None of it stopped the spread of the plague. To the people, the plague was seen as divine punishment. The church, which had always been a pillar of hope and faith, could not understand what was happening. Fear grew with each passing day, and uncertainty spread like a plague. As the plague spread, cities across the Byzantine Empire fell one after another. Homi, Alexandria, Antioch each became a desolate place, covered by the cloak of death. Panic gripped everyone. There was no distinction between the rich and the poor, kings and commoners. All were subject to the same fate. And so, while trade ports closed and Byzantine armies disintegrated, the empire, once a bastion of civilization, began to collapse. The Plague of Justinian was not just a disease. It was a silent killer, without mercy, that destroyed the ancient world. But the plague did not respect borders. It was not confined to the Byzantine Empire. It advanced, spreading across the Mediterranean and beyond. Its spread was rapid, following the trade routes that connected the empires of the time. The very commerce that once united East and West now became the vehicle of death. The ships that crossed the Mediterranean, carrying goods between Constantinople, Alexandria, and Rome, became carriers of destruction. Each time a ship docked at a new port, it brought not only goods but also death. The cities of Messina, Naples, and eventually Rome felt the weight of the calamity. They were witnesses to the speed of the plague, which respected no form of human defense. As the plague advanced, people began to understand that there was no safe place. There was no escape. In a desperate attempt to stop the disease's spread, Byzantine rulers began to implement isolation measures. Cities began closing their ports, and people isolated themselves in their homes. But it was too late. The plague had already penetrated deep into society. The world the Byzantines knew was crumbling with every passing day. As the empire crumbled, fear took over the people. In search of answers, some turned to supernatural explanations. The clergy, powerless in the face of the calamity, began to assert that the plague was divine retribution. Flagellant bands began to appear, men who, in extreme penitence, would whip themselves to expiate the sins of a society that had fallen into decadence. Desperation gave rise to irrational explanations, and paranoia spread even further. Conspiracies emerged, and a deep fear of others gave rise to waves of violence. As months passed, the Byzantine Empire disintegrated into ruins. The population of Constantinople shrank dramatically, and the city, once one of the most prosperous in the world, became a ghostly place. With the death of so many, social and economic structures collapsed. Trade fell apart. The fields were left without farmers, and the land without workers. The feudal system collapsed, and food production plummeted. However, the plague did not stop advancing. It followed the Mediterranean coast, reaching the north of Africa, where it devastated the most prosperous regions of the time. Its impact was global. Meanwhile, the Eastern Empire, weakened and debilitated, faced its greatest test of survival. And so, the Plague of Justinian, which began as an unknown evil in the steppes of Central Asia, spread throughout the ancient world, leaving in its wake a humanity devastated and questioning its very existence. It was not just physical death that it brought, it was the end of an era, the end of a world. The legacy of the Plague of Justinian would last for centuries. The medieval society that followed would be marked by the scars of this collective trauma. The plague not only took millions of lives, but also transformed the course of history in ways no one could have foreseen. And, like all great tragedies, it taught a bitter lesson. Humanity is not invincible. When nature turns against us, even the greatest empires can fall. In the end, what remained was a world that, while still breathing, was permanently altered, shaped by the shadow of death and the relentless search for answers. The Plague of Justinian was not just a biological catastrophe. It was a testament to human fragility, a reminder that, despite all our grandeur, we are vulnerable to the unpredictable, the invisible. And history, once again,